All right. Hi, and welcome everyone to Houston Chronicle Live. I am joined, of course, by Superintendent Mike Miles and Education reporter Sam González Kelly. We're really excited to have you guys here today. This is going to be a good treat, a real treat for you all, our subscribers. If you have a question for the superintendent, let's try to keep them germane and civil. Let's enter them into the chat below. I've also got tons of questions submitted by email. But yeah, without further ado, I know we have a lot to get through. So Sam, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, and thank you, Superintendent, for joining us today. Yeah, I know the public is excited to hear your thoughts on how the district's been going this year. So yeah, I think let's start with a question that is on a lot of community members' mind concerning the recent Spectrum report that accuses your former charter network, Third Future, with illegally funneling money from its Texas campuses to its Colorado campuses. I'm wondering if you can address those allegations at all.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Sam. Sam, I think you were there when I had a conversation where I was going to dismiss it out of hand because it was an accusation that didn't make sense, no allegations that I could see. And so we struggled with whether we should respond at all. But since there is community interest and you're asking me the question in front of a bunch of your readers, let me just say, of course, this is how Third Future Schools operates, is how a lot of other charter networks operate. And if you operate in more than one place, more than one state, then of course, there's money going from the schools legitimately to the network, so that the network's like a central office, right? And so every school in 3 different states are sending money to the central office that then pays the salaries of the staff and of the teachers, et cetera. So so that's why I considered it nonsense. It is nonsense. In fact, I would welcome a TEA investigation or some other investigation so that people could see that this is how the work happens. This is not unusual. And just because somebody claims it's unusual, again, I don't think there's any allegation of wrongdoing, but even without an allegation, let's have TEA or somebody else look into it so that we can, put that to rest and the public can be satisfied that nothing untoward has happened. Third Future School is a great organization, by the way. That's why 8 different districts in 3 states have allowed them to take over their underserved communities, and the results are phenomenal. And so to disparage them like that, I think is wrong. So they have a lot of hard work to do. I have a lot of hard work to do. This is an issue that should be a non-issue. So I'm not going to spend any more time talking about it today or going into the future because we've got so much work to do.
Yeah, I do want to ask just one more question on that, and then we'll move on to HISD. The Texas Education Code does appear to show that public school districts, including charters, can use money towards the betterment of students however they see fit. One audit did show that there was a $2.7 million deficit at Third Future Texas due to liabilities to other TFS network schools and to TFS corporate. So I guess legality aside, I'm wondering if you consider that a problem in any way or an ethical practice within Third Future.
Yeah, I don't know enough information about that. That wasn't on my watch, that audit. So I don't have any comment on that. I don't know about that. I do know that they're a financially viable organization. I think they'll have a $2 million fund balance this year and $9 million next year or something like that. And they've been supported by Charter School Growth Fund, who's looked at their financials real closely. So I think Third Future Schools, if you ask them, they can show you how financially healthy they are.
Okay. And then another topic that I think is top of mind for a lot of our audience is the non-renewal notices that went out to a significant number of principals and teachers last week. I was wondering if you can explain why these employees, which include multiple recent principals of the year, why they're not being invited back, and what data you used to arrive at these conclusions.
So, Sam, every year about this time, maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later, not much later, districts go through a process where they're inviting back principals and inviting back teachers, or non-renewing either teachers or principals. So that is not abnormal. What may be not less clear, though, is the why, and that's what you're asking me. And I think I want to reinforce that we have started from the beginning of the year to message with the teacher evaluation system, with the principal evaluation system, that effectiveness now is going to be looked at through the lens of data, performance, and clear oversight from executive directors or the principal if we're talking about teachers. And so both in the teacher realm and principal realm, we are looking at data. What sort of data? We're looking at spot observations or instructional reviews. We're looking at achievement data, ones that we have. Of course, we haven't really evaluated every teacher yet and every principal, because that happens at the end of year, after the end of year data. But we have data during the year. We have performance information. If we're talking about teachers, for example, principals have been in the classroom a lot. The spot observations play into that. If you're talking about principals, the performance, the EDs, executive directors, have been in the schools a lot. So there's leadership data for principals. So what I'm trying to say is we're looking at data in many different facets to determine how effective a principal is and how effective a teacher is.
Yeah. So with regards to the principals specifically, though, you said in March that the district would not use the proficiency screeners to be, to make adverse employment decisions. So was the data that went into these decisions last week the same that was in the proficiency screener?
So let's be very clear. Yes, we abandoned Proficiency Screener 2. That's correct. But I said at the time, and I said at the beginning, and I said afterwards, that we're going to continue to use data, the data that goes in the evaluation. There was always some confusion around the Proficiency Screener. So in order to drop that confusion, or to make that confusion or lack of understanding, to minimize that, we dropped the Proficiency Screener 2. I was very careful to say we're still going to use data, which we have.
Mm-hmm.
So was there data in the Proficiency Screener? Yes. Is the same data still exists and is used to assess principals? Yes.
So did that decision to I guess formally do away with the structure of the proficiency screener, but continue to use the underlying data, did that decision, I guess, really have any significant meaning beyond, removing that title?
No, look, the reason for removing the Proficiency Screener mostly was because of the lack of clarity, and because there was misunderstanding. Part of that is my fault for not making it more clear how it would be used, although I think the principals fairly well understood it. But also because it's the first time it's ever been done. And so having the proficiency screener in there caused more confusion than we needed, especially since the data, we still have the data, but it also got the data got characterized, or some of the information that got out there got characterized as bad information, or non-proficiency, or low, that these folks would be terminated, remember? And because that was confusing, even though I said over and over again that it's not bad news, that 117 principals still, most of them will still be here, we couldn't overcome the perception that it was a bad list, so to speak. So that's why we got rid of the proficiency screener.
Gotcha. Sure. I mean, I think that some of the conclusions that I guess we've arrived to last week ultimately remain the same in that case, then if the same data, I guess, was being used. But I see your point. Let's I want to contextualize that, I guess, within the context of broader turnover throughout the year, specifically among teachers, where the mid-year resignation rate has been about double of the average over the past 5 years. And I want to know if that's a concern for you, or an indication that educators may be unhappy with the direction of the district.
Yeah, I want to say first that the overwhelming majority of the teachers are doing a great job. And it's when we get the news stories about the smaller percentages of teachers who are leaving for whatever reason, it makes it seem like they're not. And I want to say to everybody, let's make sure we understand that the overwhelming majority of the teachers are doing a great job, and the overwhelming majority of teachers are going to stay here and have not left. In fact, we're finding great interest in the positions in the district, both internally and externally. And I've talked about the job fairs being well attended, and we feel like we're going to have another year where there's 0 vacancies at the start of the year. It's never easy in an environment that has shortages of teachers, but we think we're going to be able to do that. And so the other thing is, this is a turnaround situation. This has been a rough year. Let's acknowledge that. It's a lot of change. And I've said over, and I'm going to say it again in front of your readers, I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for teachers and principals and other staff members who were here doing doing the work. And then my team comes in and we start changing things. I get it when that feels unsettling, like we pull the rug out from some people. That makes sense. So if people leave as a result of that, that is totally understandable. And I would expect some people to say, hey, this is not for me. I didn't sign up for this. So the fact that some people left mid-year is, first of all, people leave mid-year all the time. In fact, in the profession, more and more people are leaving mid-year than ever before across the country. And so the fact that many have left during the year does make sense to me. But I think the real question is, are we able to staff our schools in a way that will help our kids succeed and also be well? And I think the answer is yes, we're going to be able to do that.
With regards to your last point, like how have you been, or how has the district been dealing with situations where a kid, might have had three or four different teachers throughout the school year, which can be pretty disruptive for a student? How has the district been addressing situations like that?
Yeah, so that's that is a problem all the time, every year, not just this year. But it's less of a problem this year than it ever has been. And the reason it's less of a problem is because in 85 schools, which is a third of the district, there are no substitutes. And when a teacher leaves, there's a teacher apprentice who's been in the school to replace that teacher, to step in for that teacher. So imagine no substitutes at all. There's way more consistency in those schools. Next year, it'll be half the district like that, 130 schools with no substitutes, where there are teacher apprentices who can step in. The kids know the teacher apprentices or the learning coach, they know them. And so when they step in, there'll be less instability in those schools.
And on the new education system, it's going to be expanding to 150 schools, over half the district within the next 2 years. There is a significant segment of the community that believes the system functions as a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to education that disproportionately affects Black and brown students. So I'm wondering if you can address those concerns, and is it refer to any pedagogical evidence that this system is effective, that will be spreading to half the district within the next 2 years?
So I think I hear less and less this notion of black and brown kids being affected negatively, because the NES program has shown that the kids like the structure, the parents like that the structure of the NES schools. We're spending more resources in the NES schools. So at the same breath, when you're saying that there's black and brown kids are negatively being affected, we're actually applying more resources. We're going to get another group of people who are angry that there's more resources going to the NES schools, which is 130 of them. So I think you're going to see over time that argument fade away, because you can see when kids get dyad program, which is martial arts, piano, cycling, on top of electives, more. When they can go to school at 6:30, if they want to go to school at 6:30, the parents like that. Many people are taking advantage of that. When they're getting high quality instruction like the rest of the district, but especially in our underserved communities that haven't had the same level of instruction, they're getting it now. When they're getting more resources, when they're getting more, the most effective teachers are incentivized to go to those schools. I think you're going to hear, like I have heard in the 85 schools that I've been into, in those schools, that they're feeling like this is a program that's going to help their kids succeed.
Do you have any sort of, evidence that this is the correct approach, the best way to do things?
Yes, I do. We have this year's data already. Instructionally, we had the NWA data, but really we have the principals and the administrative team that oversees instruction looking at how the progress has been in these schools. And it's been really good from the start of the school to now. We are not done. I want to say that. 1 year does not a trend make. It's been a year of change, so there's going to be disruption. And yet, even with that, the schools have made great progress. And not just the NES schools, by the way, the other schools as well.
Yeah, and with regards to your point, that the students and the community really enjoy these NES schools. I was reminded of a conversation I had recently with two really bright young high school students at an NES school who were talking about kind of their impressions of this first year, and they were telling me that they feel like their academics have received a boost, that they're more engaged in class and learning more, but they also kind of bemoaned what they felt was a loss of school culture, kind of the ability to be a kid, that they just didn't enjoy coming to school as much. And I'm wondering if you think that those two things are mutually exclusive, that to have these really rigorous academics, we also need to have this regimented approach to the structure of a school and a school day and a lesson, without too much deviation from that.
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. And I know that's one, that's a couple anecdotes, and there are many other anecdotes about kids thriving and not only liking the rigor, but also liking the fact that there's more activities like dyads, there's more, the electives are still there, they still have recess, they still have lunch, and kids like the fact that they're learning. I go to the team centers all the time. Those are for the readers that may not know, in the NES schools, after the direct instruction, kids are divided into four, and the accelerated group and the proficient students go into a room with desks and chairs, and they work independently. Sometimes that's the library, sometimes it's just a big room. Those are called team centers, and when I go in there, I sit and talk to kids about, do they like the team center? Do they like what's going on? And overwhelmingly, they say yes, they like it. They would rather not return to the old way where they have to stay in class. So there's joy in learning too. Let's not reinforce a myth that happiness only happens when you have, electives or longer recess or something like that, or watching a movie. Kids get enjoyment out of learning as well.
I wanna shift to the budget, because we only have a couple minutes left before we transition to reader questions. The district is facing a deficit of hundreds of $1 million that you've said will largely be made up by cuts in the central office. I was wondering if you could talk about your approach to the cuts, what you're prioritizing, and what is at risk.
Yeah, thanks for asking. You asked a really nuanced question, so I'll take a minute, but I know we don't have a lot of time. The most important part of what you said is what's at risk. The risk is, if we don't right-size the budget today, this year, we could go off the fiscal cliff, which was predicted by the last administration. And if we have 2 years of really low deficits, where we eat into the fund balance even more, down to around 250 million, which the last administration predicted would be 2 years from now, next year, and then 1 more year, that would actually prompt a takeover faster than achievement going down, because that would be mismanagement of funds. Even though it's not this administration's fault, we are in the situation we're in. So that's the risk. We'd also lose our AAA rating, yes, especially if we go out for the bond. It would cost way more. We wouldn't get the bonds at a rate that we want. So it's important that people understand that we have to do it now. The unfortunate thing is that a lot of federal relief money disguised the poor financial situation the district was in, and allowed the district not to cut positions or to cut expenses, even though enrollment was going down. So now we have the end of that one-time money, and we have to pay for it. The enrollment is still down. But instead of paying for the latest decrease, we have to pay the decrease of enrollment for the last 4 years, all at one time, and other things like that. So it is a tough financial position we're in. So we've had to cut expenditures pretty significantly in order to make sure we're above that $800 million fund balance and don't reach the fiscal cliff that was predicted by the last administration.
So can you tell me a little bit about what you're planning to cut?
Yes. So we are keeping the cuts away from the classroom. And what I mean by that is, when a student goes to school next year at the school that he has been in, the class size will remain about the same. He still will have all the magnet programs, dance or violin or whatever he or she was experiencing before. He or she will still have high quality instructional materials. They will still have an effective teacher. And so that's what I mean by keeping the cuts away from the classroom. We're also prioritizing teacher salaries. Even in this tough time, even in a normal year, a $2,500 wage increase for every teacher is huge. For the NES schools, 130 schools, think about that for this district. It's always challenging to raise salaries for any district, any time, especially one of this size. But for 130 schools, 5,100 teachers, Chapter 21 employees, will have about an 80 for elementary school, $82,000 average salary. For middle school, 84 or 85, somewhere in there. And for high school, about an 88,000 average salary. I said average salary, so some people make 70 some thousand, some people make closer to 90,000, et cetera. So that's a huge win for teachers. 5,100, that's half the teachers in the district are going to make in the 80s for their average salary. We did that in 1 year, and that's the priority. Now, in order to do that, we've had to cut back on central office pretty considerably. So you'll see every department and central office has been cut. And I know, someone hearing me right now would say, well, why not give the teachers less? And, then you wouldn't have to cut so much in central office. The truth is the kids and the teachers deserve the priority every year. And if we can raise teacher salaries more, especially in the non-NES orbit, we should do that. So that means over the last 5 years, instead of the growth in central office expenditures, we should have been cutting central office expenditures. And that's why we're able to, and even painfully so, cut central office positions.
And will those cuts in central office include people, at the highest ranks of, or people or salaries at the highest ranks of administration? Just because we've seen custodians, being non-renewed at very high rates, wraparound workers as well. And last year, your administration significantly boosted salaries for top administrators in the district. So I'm wondering if those cuts are going to be, felt evenly across the board.
So number one, we didn't significantly boost salaries. We had more people at a
Mhm.
higher salary.
Okay.
That's a distinction I want to make. But the answer is this: that's always a false equivalence, right? The question is, how can we work more effectively and still get outcomes for kids? The deputy chiefs and the chiefs that I have is necessary for this organization that has had poor systems in place for over a decade. They probably should have had more highly skilled people in those positions so that we would have a transportation system that works, so that we wouldn't have as many mistakes in HR. And it's not the people that's the problem, it's the system that's the problem. So we should have had skilled people who can look systemically and fix things for the last 5, 6, 7 years. So I put people in place that will really help this district. In fact, if we had not had some of these strong executives, we would not have been able to do zero-based budgeting, which means that we would not have been able to downsize and still be effective in the job, so that we don't do twice the same amount of work with half as many people. We're getting the same amount of outcomes with fewer people. And so that equivalent should not be made as if it is equivalent. It's a false equivalence.
And I want to touch on one more topic before we get to reader questions, which is the possibility of a bond election this fall. I'm wondering if you can give us some details about how much the district will be asking for, what it will go to, how the district is going to manage these funds, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't want to give exact numbers right now because the board has not approved us going for bond. We need to, we're still exploring, and the board has been getting some updates, but they haven't gotten the main work yet. So I don't want to give the exact number, but here's what I can say, because we've been doing the work, and that is there is great need in this district for a bond. If we just added up the need, it's probably about $10 billion. And of course, we can't do that. We can't go out for a $10 billion bond. But the last time the district had a bond was in 2012. And that was just a high school bond, right? The last time elementary or middle schools had a significant bond was in 2007. So you're talking about, a lot of time passed. What is it, 17 years before any significant investment in elementary or middle schools. And even at that time, 2007, a lot of schools had need. I think the community can also understand that we have the biggest issues that we have are security and health, meaning we've got schools without one point of entry. We have schools without fencing, without lights, without cameras. We have schools that have health issues like air conditioning. Simple keeping the building cool in the summer and warm when it gets really cold, that's been a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge. And when you walk by some of our schools, if you go to some of these schools, it'll break your heart. the conditions of the building with holes in the floor or in the roof or just decaying pipes. I mean, it's just, no kid should have to go to school like that. And so we're going to approach the community with information. Hopefully another group will advocate for it, but if the board approves us going for it, we'll give a lot more information about what the conditions are and where the need is.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that most everyone can agree that there's, need for, upgrades to facilities, and that our kids deserve the best schools that they can have. We've seen no trust, no bond kind of emerge as a rallying cry among a lot of the community, who feel that as much need as there is, they don't trust your administration to handle the bond money effectively. And I'm curious how you plan to win their trust when this is one area where, community members can really make their sentiment, directly known.
Yeah, I think there's also a whole bunch of people in the community, having looked at some survey data, that really know or understand that our kids need a bond, regardless of people's feelings about the takeover or the intervention. I think they understand that our kids can't wait. I think they get that, kids deserve, air conditioning. They deserve heat in the winter. They deserve classrooms that are not, or not a temporary building that's been there, these portables that have been there for 40 years. That's just not right for kids. And I trust, I mean, first of all, if the truth part of all that, no trust, no bond, is that the onus is on us to build trust, that I get, that I accept. At the same time, I trust that the community, once they find out about the conditions in their particular school or in other, in other parts of the district, I think they're gonna come around also and say, look, despite whatever's going on politically with the administration or anything else, this is what our kids deserve. And this is a long-term investment in HISD and in the city.
Well, thank you. Jennifer, I think we can turn it over to reader questions, if you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you explain one more time? This is a question that is appearing on Zoom a few times. Can you explain one more time to our readers what data is being used to evaluate principals and teachers?
Yeah, so we have from the very beginning of the year focused on the quality of instruction. I think most people know that by now. And it's certainly the teachers and principals have risen to the occasion, and they have been using high quality instruction as a gauge to help the kids. And so principals have been looking at teachers all year long. In fact, there's been complaints that there's too many visits from principals or executive directors. And so that they've been in the classroom a lot, which is one way principals know how the quality of instruction for a teacher is. There's been record number of spot observations. That's an actual form that we use to assess. Those have been recorded. So that's one set of data, the spot observations, and principal interaction, because they're in the classrooms all the time providing feedback. That's throughout the entire system. And that hasn't happened before. So when a principal removes a teacher in the past, it usually wasn't about performance, because most principals didn't know what was going on in the classroom. That's most, not all, but most did not know and wouldn't be able to make a statement about it. So that's one set of data. Another set of data is achievement data. So our smallest kids have circle exams. We have Dibbles exam. This is a literacy exam for the early grades. We have NWEA data. We have what's called demonstrations of learning data. I mean, there's all kinds of achievement data. There's interim assessments. there's EOC exams and things like that. So that set of data is also available for a principal to use to think about how strong or effective a teacher is. And then there's just data from the principal when they look at, I don't want to get too technical, but when you look at domain 4 of the T-test rubric, it's about professionalism. It's about continuous improvement. It's about working in a team. And that data, those observations the principals make all the time, and that also informs their judgment about whether a teacher should be returned or not. So those generally are the pieces of data that we look at.
And there's another question that's related, and it's worth, in a bit of transparency, are you able to release this data for the community to see? And is this expectation also communicated with principals and teachers who, for the most part, there's reports of feeling blindsided by some notices?
So, there's 11,000 teachers. I don't know if any of them were blindsided, but I can tell you this: spot observation data has been tracked since the beginning of the year, and those spot observations the teachers have had access to. The NWA data, the circle data, the other data is also available to the teacher. The domain 4 has been done, I think, at least once in the middle of the year, and is going to be done again at the end of the year. So there may be teachers whose principals haven't been as strong a coach, but for the most part, and a person who's really interested in how they're doing could have found the data, could have asked the principal if they couldn't find it, but they would know at this point in the year.
All right, this is a question emailed in by a subscriber. When you began this position, when Superintendent Miles started this position last June, you stated you would focus on the 28 NES schools and quote unquote good schools would be left alone. So this is just, after that statement, of course, we've seen that you've expanded to NES aligned schools, and then last week, highly qualified awarded tenured principals were receiving memos to resign or face the Board of Managers review. Why is it that you keep expanding your scope instead of sticking to the TA exit criteria of the failing schools?
So first of all, just one note on the forced to resign thing. There's no obligation to allow a person to resign in lieu of going to file review and being terminated. It's a common practice and a good practice to say to a principal, hey, we're going to take you to file review, but look, you have the opportunity to resign. We're going to pay you out this way through August or to August. So, here's a way to do that. We didn't have to do that. We don't have to do that. But it's just common courtesy, and a lot of districts do it. So it's not, not so unusual. So I just want to make that clear. So let's talk about scope, because if I had to do it all over again, I think what's true in the question is I should have been more clear about what autonomies schools would have, and I should have been more clear about what things in the district that we're doing would apply to everyone. I own that, so we're already trying to make that better. And you'll see next week, not this Friday, not 2 days from now, but the next Friday, all the principals will get a hard copy of the defined autonomy framework that we've been working on for the last 5 weeks. And what that means, it outlines, here's what the separate and unique schools' autonomies are, and as you can guess, they have a lot of autonomy. And here's what the A and B schools' autonomy are, which are similar to separate and unique. Here, it's in writing what the list of autonomies are. Here's what the C schools' autonomy looks like, and then there's the NES. So it's level 4, 3, 2, and 1. And also in the same document is a process to have exceptions to any autonomy that you feel that you don't have, but you want an exception for. So, and in that document is a list of things that cut across the whole district. For example, the school calendar is everybody has to follow. The TEKS, the state standards. If you teach a math or language arts course, you have to follow the TICs. That's by rule. You have to follow board policy, state law. All those things are understandable. The one thing that I should have been clear about, and I'm clearer now, is I've been clear with the principals and teachers, but maybe not the community, and that is we're going to have high quality instruction everywhere. We're going to allow for Montessori to be Montessori, but if you're going to use Montessori, which is fine, then do it well. If you're going to do project-based learning, that's fine, but also do that well. So that all of our kids get what they need, because all means all, and it's a big district, so we're gonna make sure that happens. So defined autonomy framework, I think the community will like. We've gotten great input from the principals. They've had surveys, I think 90 of them. We've had input from executive directors. We briefed the board briefly on it, and they're going to get the draft document tonight, actually. So I think that will help with any confusion that I cause around defined autonomy.
All right. Switching gears, this question came in from my subscriber email. There are rumors that your vision to streamline schools by cutting very popular magnet programs. How are you planning to support programs like gifted and talented, dual language, specialized music, magnets, theater programs, etc.?
There's evidence to the contrary for my support of magnet schools and magnet programs. You might remember in the summer when we hadn't done anything yet, and we started NES, and people said, well, the magnet programs are going to go away. That hasn't happened. No magnet programming in the district has gone away. And in fact, the board just designated 2 schools, separate and unique schools. So an increase. So we've actually put more money into the NES schools for programming like cosmetology, barbering, again, dance, graphic design, photography. We've done more so than ever was here. So there's no agenda to cut down gifted and talented or magnet. In fact, I think the defined autonomy framework will show that those schools will continue to be able to do well. In fact, one of the things that I think the district has always been proud of and should continue to be proud of is that we have some of the best magnet programming and schools in the nation, and that's not going to change.
All right. Here's another question that was written in via email. The Texas legislature failed to pass a massive education bill in last year's legislative session that would have boosted spending in public schools. You may know this. Governor Abbott has said he's not responsible for public education budget shortfalls. How would you respond to Greg Abbott and our state legislator about funding our public schools and supporting our children, especially when Texas has had a record $32 billion, that's billion with a B, surplus, and spent so much less than other states on public education?
Well, I'm not a politician. I don't know that much about the legislature, but I know this. I know that we were able to right-size our budget this year. The most difficult part of that was the ESSER monies that was made into recurrent expenses, a lot of it. And so we were able to do that without any other additional money. But having said that, if we want to continue to grow NES or more programming, we're going to need additional funds. And so I hope the state will release some of that money and raise the state allocation, because it's not just HISD. 80% of all the schools are traditional public schools. We need that money to continue to grow. Our kids are behind. The need is great. So I'm hoping we get more state monies.
Right. And actually, I think, maybe a better way to rephrase that question, because, I understand you're not a politician, but you are appointed by the state. So how are you going to advocate for your district?
Yeah, so it's a good thing that they appointed a person who's not a politician. I'm going to advocate, but first of all, I just said, I think we're going to need more state allocation. And if I get a chance to, if I get asked that question by the commissioner or the governor, then I will tell them what I said to you, is that, look, we're being fiscally responsible. I get that sometimes districts don't always use their monies wisely. I'm sorry, this district did not last year, the year before. And so we've done that. We've right-sized without any additional monies. However, there comes a point where even HISD, as fiscally as responsible as we're going to be, will need more money in order to raise salaries again, in order to have more NES schools. So, and again, that's not just HISD, that's all districts.
All right, here's a question that we're seeing in the chat feature in Zoom. Do you support an independent third-party audit of your TFS charter in Texas and Colorado so we can feel assured there's nothing illegal in this transaction and build public confidence in your ability to manage funds and potentially a bond?
Yeah, I thought I said that. Yes, is the answer to the question.
Okay, all right. Yes. So for those of you asking, yes, he welcomes an audit. And a little bit more related to that, this is a parent of 3 HISD kids who wrote in via email. We have heard that you think of these parents speaking out are quote unquote noise and a bunch of magnet moms, but it is hard to ignore the hundreds of parents who came out this week to protest at various campuses around the city. What do you think of their efforts now?
Yeah, I challenge the notion about magnet moms, because I'm not sure I've disparaged anybody who's a parent of a kid who goes to a magnet school. What do I think about the parents who are protesting in favor of principals and teachers? Is that the question?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so look, totally understandable. Again, this is the first time, probably, I don't know for sure, but have a fair idea, the first time principals and teachers have been evaluated or assessed during this time of year with data and, with rigor. And I understand that people grow used to and like the teacher or the principal and may not agree with the data or even the use of data to assess a teacher. So the fact that people are out there saying, look, this is wrong, or they've got this part wrong, that's understandable. And I think over time, people will understand that we have a different metric than maybe the past, and that the principals and the executive directors are making good decisions around employment.
There was someone in the chat who said that they were actually a fan of using data. They were really, really excited about this approach. And I'm seeing over and over again, I think people want to know how they can access this data. Is that something that ever might be made available even after the full year in any way, shape, or form?
No, I think we'll release any information that's available to the public, like NWA, but it's a big argument among teachers and the profession whether or not you can or should release individual teacher data. Many teachers don't want that. And so I think if you were to poll teachers, they would say, even if I think I'm going to have good data, I don't want everybody to know what my spots observation data was, and I don't want everybody to know what my individual classroom STAR exams were. Now, whatever's required by law we'll do, of course, but it's a bigger question about whether or not you release individual people's performance data.
All right. Moving on, we got a lovely email from a single mom who said that she appreciates at the school she now has before care and after care, which is nice to see. But, she also asks, she generally wants to know, why do you think the public distrusts you so much? If your intent is to do such wonderful things, why do you think there are so few fans of him?
So few fans? Well, that hurts.
I am reading it directly. I'm sorry.
It's like 185,000 students and a lot more parents and community members. Anyway, look, I've said it before. This is a change environment. I mean, first of all, whether I like it or not, I'm the face of the takeover. I don't like it, but that's, somebody's got to be the face, and I guess it's mine, unfortunately for you guys. And so there's already going to be some people who are angry with me just because. I mean, I don't know if you were here, that first board meeting, we hadn't done anything. I hadn't even said a word. And there's like all this anger. And so I think that's part of it. The second part is there's a lot of change. This notion of whole-scale systemic reform, I've said before, has never been done before at this scale. Whole-scale systemic reform. I said it in the last summer. I'm not sure people understood exactly what I meant, which is comprehensive, far-reaching change and reform done to a small part of the district all at one time. And so I think even if you were to do one thing, for example, this discussion about pay for performance, that sends people in other communities, yelling and screaming and angry across the United States when when more and more districts were trying to do it. And, people came out to yell and be angry about that. Some, in some communities that was rightfully so. So that's just one thing. Just think about all the things we're doing. That's number two. Number three, I do believe, and I hope I'm going to be charitable to news and social media and everybody else providing information, but we're in an age and time where information, there's so much misinformation out there, and we're so divided that we take sides quickly, and it seems like there's little room for nuance. Not everybody, but in the broad spectrum of things, what I hear, what I experience, is this lack of nuance, and it's just either it's good or it's bad, or this is the way it should be, and there's not enough trying to understand. And I think that, the biggest problem in America today, regardless of education, I've said this before, is the inability to have truth and accuracy. Truth and accuracy, truth is way more nuanced. And to spread misinformation is so easy and spreads quickly and is less nuanced. And that's the environment we live in. That's not an excuse. That's a reason for some of the lack of trust, I think. So those three reasons, the onus still is on me. I said this before, to continue to try to build trust. And I think over time, I'm already seeing it, at least in the schools, at least among my staff and among the principals. They're feeling more and more that we are doing, first of all, what we said we're going to do. Second, we're doing things that are totally focused on kids, and it's having an outcome, and it's getting results. So I think over time, I will continue to try to convince the community that I only have one agenda. I think all this other stuff makes it seem like there's more than one agenda. The only agenda I have and that the board has is to help the students of HISD get the best education possible and be prepared for year 2035 environment. That's it. That's what I live, breathe, and will die by.
All right, so we have time for one more question, and then unfortunately we're at time, but before we do, I just want to remind everyone that, again, the tenor of this discussion is regarding Superintendent Miles' first year in office. Sam Kelly and his team are working on some really great stuff, and we want to hear from you. So after this event, there's going to be an email survey sent out. If you could help us take that survey, we want to know how parents and teachers feel. Please fill that out and let us know. All right, and then wanted to wrap this up quickly. Yeah, I think that's a really fair point, Superintendent Miles, and this is actually a good question, I think, coming from all kinds of parents, regardless of how they feel about you. What do you think was, looking back on your first year, like, what do you think was the best thing you accomplished, and what's something that maybe you would want to do differently?
Yeah, let me say the best decision I made was to add 57 schools to the 28. I know that was disruptive, but it was the best thing for kids. When you go to the 85 schools like I have done this year, instructionally looking at it, and in some of those 85 more than once, you're gonna see that overall those kids are thriving and that those schools are gonna do well. The thing I already said, I'll just double down on, that I would do over again, I didn't do very well, is to explain what the reform effort would mean for the schools that are not NES, and the schools that are A and B, and the schools that are separate and unique. I wish I could do that over again. Can't do that over again. So what we're trying to do is fix it now, and we spent the last 5 weeks trying to come up with a better solution. Earlier, I was going to do defined autonomy in the fall, remember, but because of the lack of clarity, the persuasion of the board to move faster on that, we did. So you're gonna see that. Overall, I would say this though. I know for the community, it may seem like there's been a lot of pushback. I've been doing change and change management for 20 years and more actually, but and I understand the pace of that. I am so impressed with how much this district was able to accomplish in just 1 year. And actually, the amount of pushback has been relatively little considering the size of the district and the number of things that got done. I'm very impressed with our principals, our teachers, and yes, not all of them were able to meet the bar that we needed them to be at. But the overwhelming majority, we keep focusing on the small groups instead of the bigger picture. And I sit back and I look at the whole picture, and this has been an incredible year. I'm not just saying, I've been in these changes for many years, and I can see how things are progressing. And also, and you may not know this because the supporters don't come out with signs, there has been so much a show of support from so many different groups who have told me, hey, this needs to be done, hang in there, stay the course. And so that's what we're going to do.
All right, sounds good. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Sam Kelly, Superintendent Miles, thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Take care.